We're good? All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I know that the afternoon speaking slot is the most coveted speaking slot. Obviously, everyone's nice and fresh like spring chickens. No one's ready to get outside. Luckily, Thor remembered that I like to move when I talk and gave me a lav mic so that I don't have to look like I'm a caged animal behind the podium. I appreciate that. So I want to ask if this story sounds familiar to anybody. If you have ever imagine that you're at home, you're playing with your child. There are no demands being placed. There's nothing wrong. Their siblings are being angelic. There's no loud sounds. There's no weird smells. Nothing you can see that's wrong. You're like, yes, we've got it. We are like at homeostasis. We're having a great time. And then like 5 minutes later, everything has turned on a dime. We're in like category 5 meltdown territory. And you cannot, for the life of you, figure out what happened from point A to point B. Is that anyone? Anyone that sounds, okay, I'm seeing hands. So I'm Lucy K. Jones. I'm a senior BCBA and the clinic coordinator at Blue Sky Behavior Therapy in Mississippi. I got my master's of early childhood special education at the University of Texas in Austin. And I have experience in treating Wiedemann-Steiner Syndrome, which is rare. Not a lot of BCBAs have firsthand experience in treating WSS warriors. So I feel very fortunate to have done that. Here actually is with me. My experience in treating WSS actually led to a professional expertise, like a specialization in treating medically complex cases and cases that have comorbid anxiety. So we'll talk a lot about that. This is actually one of my other recent graduates from a medically complex case because it turns out there's not that many WSS cases. I just have the one. But I have several other medically complex cases that I've taken that I've learned and used that over the years. So this is me and my WSS warrior. This actually might have been before we got the diagnosis, or right around the time that they got his diagnosis. That's me and Christian. Our goals today is we're going to take a behaviorist view to consider why children with WSS might be more likely to develop challenging behavior, right? I'm sure you guys have heard that. It's in the diagnostic profile, like on the website. I don't know if anyone's kind of explained from a behaviorist view why that's more likely to happen with children, medically complex children in general, and also children with autism. Why a typical ABA approach might seem like it's not going to work for a WSS warrior. In fact, has anyone in here tried ABA and it failed? Yes, okay, yes, so there are going to be some things that might feel like they're very targeted to you. They're not. But I learned when I was here, when I was with you guys when we were in Baltimore, that this felt like a pretty universal experience. They said that they had tried, whether you tried with a BCBA in the school district, or you tried with a private BCBA, or you were working with a social worker who took like a really generic behavior approach, and it completely flopped. And I can tell you, not with 100% certainty, but I can tell you with like 98% certainty why it didn't work. And then I'm going to give you some tips for finding a provider that might be more successful in providing behavior treatment. Some of that is just general BCBA red flag, green flag. I'll give you my business card. If you're like, hey, help me screen this BCBA, make sure they don't suck. I'll be like, I would love to do that. I would love to make sure that you have a BCBA that knows what they're doing. Okay, so where does behavior come from? Now, I'm speaking strictly from a behaviorist point of view. Is that the only way to understand behavior and motivation and the way things happen in life? Absolutely not. It is not. But it's the perspective that I'm speaking from today. So that's Pavlov, Skinner, anyone who has read into any of that. So the behaviorist model for understanding behavior, and this is probably something that someone has told you before. This is not likely this is new information, but if it is, we're going to explain it. There's an antecedent, which is like a trigger or a stimulus, something that happens in the environment. Then there's the behavior, and then there's a consequence, and that consequence either makes the behavior happen more or less. Yes, my people with the failed ABA are nodding. Someone explained this to you. Okay, great. The next bit, you're gonna nod again, so just like stretch your neck. Okay, so who's heard of this before? Who's this? Okay. This is what I thought. Your special needs parents, this again, not new to you. Behavior from a behaviorist sense doesn't just refer to challenging behavior, although people frequently talk about behavior, like problem behavior, challenging behavior. You'll hear me use a lot of different language for it. But behavior can also refer to appropriate behavior, like hand raising or requesting. So you'll hear me use it in both ways. So let's think about it when we're babies, right? This is all humans when we're babies. We're stuck in the crib. We don't want to be in the crib anymore. And so we start crying, and that crying alerts the caregiver to us, and the caregiver comes and they get us out of the crib. That's awesome. Our crying was very effective at getting our need met, which means that in the future, we are more likely to cry when that need arises. Then as we get a little bit older, what happens in a typical neurodevelopmental profile is we say, okay, well, now we don't want you to cry to get out of the crib. We want you to stay up to get out of the crib. So we might treat it that way. But what also happens is that crying, because it's their only reliable way of communicating a need, has multiple functions. It has done everything in their life. It is their easy button. It's everything that they know. So if you pick a crying baby up out of their crib, because so you've taught them how to say up because they want up, okay? Great. You pick them up and they don't stop crying. It's because they wanted something else. You got it wrong. You guessed wrong. And so then they revert back to the crying because they're like, oh my gosh, you silly grown up. Why don't you understand what I'm saying? I didn't want you to pick me up and hold me. I'm trying to get to those toys over there. Put me down. And this is where the straightforward BCBA who's like, there's an antecedent, a behavior, and a consequence, and that's what you have to figure out. Okay, that's great. It doesn't work like that. It just doesn't, because behaviors, especially when you lack communication to get specific needs met, your behavior is your old reliable communication. You're going to use that behavior to get more than one need met. So, knowing that ABC model is the foundation, it's that core little unit of ABA, is really the first domino to fall in why it might not work out for a child with WSS. Because we've got anxiety, which is an unseen trigger, right? It is a trigger that we cannot see. So when we think about our children that are sitting and playing with us and we don't see anything that's wrong, there are triggers that we don't see. There are things that trigger other thoughts and feelings that then result in anxiety. And we're going to dig into how anxiety works as an antecedent and how do you find a behavior provider or any kind of therapeutic provider that understands that and can work that into your treatment. But the other reason that children, both with autism and with WSS, are more likely to develop challenging behavior is mostly because of the communication deficit, right? They're having to rely on challenging behavior to get needs met. And so if you're working with a behavior analyst, a green flag is their view on challenging behavior should be all challenging behavior is trying to get a need met. Our first job is to find out what that need is, meet it unconditionally, and then after that, we begin treatment. Okay? So if you're working with I'm going to say it again. I'm saying, because I'm seeing people, yes, okay. If you're working with a behavior analyst, their view of challenging behavior must be that all challenging behavior is to get a need met. And our first step has to be, what is that need? And the second step is meet that need unconditionally. And if that's not their view of challenging behavior, they are not a good fit for your family. they're just, it's because the anxiety and the motor development and the speech and communication development that comes with having a child, a medically complex child, a genetically complex child, a child with autism, is that it's not going to be as simple as antecedent behavior consequence. Okay, so raise your hand if you, so remind me, who has worked with the BCBA before? Okay, and how many of you were asked at some point in your ABA career to take ABC data? Okay, and at some point during that ABC data collection, that you wrote down the behavior that happened for your WSS warrior, and you tried to figure out what the antecedent was, and you're like, no, there really wasn't an antecedent. And then some like 20-something right out of college behavior analyst said, there's no such thing as no antecedent to a behavior. Does this happen to anybody? Okay, great. I'm sorry. We're doing better. I have 9 graduate students that work under me. It's one of the first things I teach them is do not ever talk to a parent this way. Do not ever assume that they don't know something. Let's dig deeper for this, right? Because there is such a thing as an antecedent to a behavior that we cannot see. We cannot determine what it is. And this is particularly true when you have a child who also has anxiety. And that's one of the frequently occurring symptoms for Wiedemann-Steiner children. It is one of the frequently co-occurring symptoms for children with autism. Right now, data shows that it's particularly true for females with autism, but I think there's more nuance to that, right? And so let's talk about what does anxiety have to do with it, other than the obvious, right? Okay, so obviously, if I'm anxious about something, I'm less likely to be on my best behavior, right? My husband's in the room, so we're not gonna dig too deep into that, but I'm sure you can ask him later. Anxious Lucy is not going to react in the most adjusted, adaptive way. I always ask parents to think about adding on, when I try to get them to empathize with the sensory profile needs also, I also ask parents to think about a time that you have been overserved and your sensory needs were maybe heightened the next day. Maybe you are very sensitive to smells. Maybe your feet hurt because you wore shoes that you are too old to wear. Maybe you're a little nauseous. You know what I'm saying? That is really the best way I can think of describe. So you're already sensory sensitive. So we're going to put ourselves in that frame of mind, and you're anxious about something, right? And then someone asks you to do a thing that is your least favorite thing to do. Do we have the most appropriate adaptive response? No, probably not. If you do, that's great for you. I'm so proud of you. Good job. You're so well adjusted. Give everyone a card to whatever therapist you went to. But most often that's not the case. And we can't really expect our kids to do that either. And so they're living constantly with these different sensory input needs. And anxiety is a necessary biological function, right? Anxiety developed to keep us safe. When I'm working one-on-one with my acceptance and commitment therapy clients, we watch a video called The Evolution of the Human Mind. It's by Russ Harris, who's one of the developers of the ACT therapy approach. And it talks about why the human brain developed some of the things that it does, right? Why does the human brain overthink? Why do we replay events that went poorly? Why do we ruminate? Why do we compare ourselves to others? Because when we were cavemen, if we survived an attack from a lion, and then we replayed the attack from the lion over and over and over again, we got crucial information about how to survive future lion attacks. And so we survived. We compared ourselves to the group so that we could fit in, because if we were alone, then we were more likely to die. And so we compared ourselves and then changed our behavior to fit in with the group. So anxiety evolved in this way to be functional. So being anxious about things that are in fact potentially dangerous is a normal human response. And that's what ACT therapy works to do, is to get you to understand the role of anxiety in your life and how to separate it from who you are as a person. Someone with an anxiety disorder, disordered anxiety, is going to possibly feel anxious all the time. And one of the reasons for that is because of the way that our brain makes connections. Okay, so I really like being out in the garden. We live in Mississippi. It's like warm all year round. You can basically grow stuff all year round. There's no winter. I've never seen snow like this. I have no idea what to do with snow, with weather like this. Unheard of. Anything like 1% of this would have shut in Mississippi down for a couple of days. So we can be outside pretty much all the time. I am also afraid of snakes. I understand that there are good snakes. That's great. They're not my friends. And so if I'm in the garden and I am down and I'm pulling weeds and I'm moving stuff and I hear something, what sounds like something moving through the leaves, I am going to jump back, right? I'm going to jump back, put my hands up. My heart rate's probably going to increase. My respiration might increase. There was never a snake. There was never the actual presentation of a stimulus. In other words, there was no clear antecedent to my behavior. It was a stimulus associated with that antecedent historically. So if you're outside, right, if you're allergic to bees and you hear something buzz by your ear, it doesn't matter that it's a fly and that it can't hurt you. You have a biological response to the stimulus associated with that, right? And it's the same thing. I tried to get a picture of my son with his Halloween bucket because my mom bought my kids these light up Halloween buckets, which is great in theory because then they're lit up while they run. What actually happened was driving home from Halloween, he had his bright blue Halloween bucket and it was just flashing blue lights the whole time. And Abram, my husband's right here, he said, Wyatt, please stop doing that. It's making me anxious. And he said, why? He said, because I keep thinking a cop is behind us and trying to pull us over. Now, there was no cop. There was no siren, although sometimes my 4-year-old also likes to play Blippi the police car song, and it very unhelpfully has a siren at the beginning. Anyone else in a Blippi phase? Seeing nods, okay. It gets me every time. Like, I'm the one playing the song. I know that the siren's about to come on, and I still, jump a little bit, right? Okay, these are the blue lights, the sirens. Those are stimuli associated with a potential trigger for anxiety. In other words, there is no clear antecedent. Earlier today, I was here in the ballroom. I was listening to Carrie speak, and I watched a mom and a daughter sitting at a table, and the mom went to reach in her bag and just get a pen out or get her phone. So she reached in her bag to get something, and her child sitting next to her went, "Mom, where are you going?" Her mom was never going anywhere, but that child is hypervigilant in this setting to her mom touching her bag at all because it might mean a transition is coming. And so if you have a child who struggles with transitions, right, that's a thing that's pretty common. And then sometimes, so you're like, okay, I know to watch for it during transitions. But then the behavior happens at seemingly random other times when what has happened is that we have missed a stimulus that is associated with that transition or has been associated with that transition in the past. So now you take a child with disordered anxiety who has had their anxiety triggered by a thought, a sound, a smell that we were not being hypervigilant to. So their sensory needs are heightened, their anxiety is heightened, and then now we start including the fact that they have a communication deficit, they have a physical deficit. They can't even explain all of this well to you in that situation. And then we do a thing that as adults we know is unhelpful. We know it is unhelpful and we do it anyway. And we say, "What's wrong? Tell me what happened. Why are you doing this?" This is probably true for everybody, but I know it is true for me as a woman. I had to work on my ability to communicate what I needed when I was stressed because my adoring husband would come to me as I was stressed and say, what can I do to help? And I'm like, don't ever ask me that when I'm upset again. It's so unhelpful. We know it's unhelpful. We know it's unhelpful that I'm saying I don't know how to communicate. How are we expecting atypical children to do any better than we are? We can't. So all of that to say, that's a lot, right? And that's like that's a snapshot of, and we have gone well past the basics of ABA. So how do you find a BCBA who knows their stuff well enough to be able to treat around these challenges? Because straight up autism, right? A lot of BCBAs, unfortunately, have a very narrowed scope of training these days. We're working really hard to fix it. Me and the person that trained me are working hard to fix it in our 9 graduates, and I can just hope that it disseminates out further. Because plain old autism is different than medically complex children. And so you need to look for a BCBA that has some experience in treating medically complex cases. Are you going to find a BCBA that has experience treating Wiedemann-Steiner Syndrome? Probably not, just statistically, unless you move to Mississippi and then, girl, I got you. But my experience, it started with that family, but it has grown into, I specialize in all kinds of comorbidities. I've worked with 3 other children who have rare genetic conditions that have fewer than 5 children in the state, and so I've been a place for them to come. I've worked with cases complicated by trauma. I've worked with cases complicated by severe apraxia. I've worked with, most recently, a child whose case is complicated by pandas. And so they don't have to have specifically experience in working with your child's specific genetic condition. They don't have to have Wiedemann-Steiner experience. But you do want someone who has done something more than just straight up early intervention autism. Nothing wrong with that. The other BCBAs at our clinic do it, right? It's great. I'll do a case like that every now and again. It's boring, but I'll do it. You want someone with experience because, and there was a parent up here earlier who was talking about the verbal behavior profile, that the verbal behavior can sometimes be beyond. And they're like, oh, they're doing fine. Look, they can talk. They can do all these things. BCBAs that have that limited scope of training in just autism have a limited scope of training in just assessing and treating verbal behavior. And your child isn't going to present with a deficit in verbal behavior. Your child has a deficit in their ability to cope, and their ability to identify their feelings, and the ability to communicate those needs and feelings. And you are going to need someone who understands that. And so the questions to ask when you're interviewing a BCBA, first of all, if they are opposed to you interviewing them and asking questions in the intake, run. That is a BCBA with an ego problem. You don't have time for that. So get out of there. They should be openly opening the floor saying, what questions do you have for me? What have you seen on TikTok that makes you afraid of ABA? I ask that in my intakes. The other thing that the most frequent thing during your assessment process, and while you're interviewing your BCBA, the most frequent thing that they should be saying is that important to you and your child? A BCBA should never be telling you what is important to your child's development. It should be something that you are telling them what is important to you and your child. So the way that I'm training my graduate students to change this is that we don't say, well, does the child sleep in the bed with you? That's a loaded question. That's a loaded question. What we ask instead is, are you comfortable with how and where your child sleeps right now? The answer is yes, great. If that ever changes, let me know. We'll talk about it. In the intake process, we don't say, well, does your child eat enough fruits and vegetables? There's judgment in that. And the most important thing about treating complex cases and crisis behavior that I have learned is that all challenging behavior is morally neutral, and that once you can get to the headspace that challenging behavior is morally neutral, you can remain emotionally neutral while you live through periods with challenging behavior. And that BCBA, that neutrality needs to start from the beginning. So when you're interviewing them, please put that your child has Wiedemann-Steiner Syndrome in your intake packet, because this is your first screener opportunity. If you put it in your intake packet, this is what my child has, it's not just autism, they also have this, and you go to the caregiver interview, and they haven't looked it up to ask more questions about it, no, this red flag, get out of there. You want someone who is, and this happened after last year. I spoke in Baltimore. The phone rang so many times the week I got back. It was people who had left this conference, gone home, talked to their BCBA and said, hey, I found out that you are ethically obligated by your certification board to be competent in treating the kind of case that you're treating. And so you need to find someone who's done this. And I have somebody. And so you need to call her. I think some of the BCBAs, again, there's a bit of an ego problem in the field, and they didn't. But I got so many phone calls from BCBAs who said, hey, I just didn't know that another BCBA who had experience in this existed. Will you please talk to me? Will you please help me? And I said, absolutely, I would love to do that. It's not an exact science, but I would love to talk to you about it. I would love to tell you what I know. And so they should be doing that research, and they should be asking questions about it. And that's that second thing. They should be able to explain how they're planning to ensure their competence in treating your medically complex child. If they don't have the ability to say, hey, here are other cases where I have treated medically complex children. Here are other cases similar to this where I've worked with children who have anxiety. I've worked with children with genetic conditions. I've worked with children with severe challenging behavior. If they don't have that experience in their repertoire, that's not necessarily you can't work with them, but they should be ready to answer questions about how do you plan to ensure your competence. We're ethically required to do that. Is it your responsibility as parents to make sure that we're upholding our ethical responsibilities as providers? Absolutely not. But we'll add it to the list of other things that y'all weren't really planning on doing, including being financial planners and IEP advocates and all the other things that should be happening, but you're having to do anyway. And this last one, they should be able to tolerate and then potentially even answer how they're going to control for anxiety in your child's treatment. It is almost, if your child doesn't have anxiety or isn't presenting signs of anxiety right now, they will, especially as they approach puberty. Carrie talked about it this morning. They need to have a plan as to how they're going to control for that. And we're going to talk about the treatments that help on the front end and on the back end, and what I was successful in working with Christian. But just in case I run out of time, because I'll get on a soapbox and yammer on. The two big ones that you want to ask them about are skills-based treatment, which is a trauma-informed severe behavior treatment that has a built-in control for children with pre-existing conditions, with unseen antecedents. And the second one, if you have an older child, is acceptance and commitment therapy, because that's actually a back-end treatment for if you deal with anxiety. And that's not ABA specific. You can find a regular mental health counselor. In fact, if you, I do ACT with my parents frequently. It helps. It's great. I love ACT. And it's based on that same idea that we talked about, where one idea can kind of kick off. One stimulus can make us think of another stimulus, which can make us think of another stimulus, which causes us anxiety, which is the reason for those, backseat confessions or those random backseat questions where you're like, where did that come from? Why are we asking about birthday balloons right now? There's nothing, and it's because we have that chain reaction. It's called relational frame theory. Okay, so I built in a pause for questions. We are still broadcasting. I put this in for myself so that I would check the time. I think I'm doing okay. And also just to take a second, because it is the afternoon, I'm going to tell you some about some of my friends. All of these children are medically complex children that I The bottom two have successfully graduated to their least restrictive environment. Their genetic condition and severe apraxia, trauma and severe apraxia, rare genetic condition in the top right corner. She's still with us, but she is about to go to school for the first time ever in her life. And then top left is my panda's case. These are all my babies. I'm very proud of them. But if there are any questions that you're cool with being on the broadcast that you want to, just before I move on to, what I'm going to do next is go more in depth into skills-based treatment and why it works. We got anything? What you got? I'm coming.
Before this, you said there were two things, and then you said one was something about being trauma-informed. Can you just say a little bit more about that?
About trauma-informed care. So the question was, can I say something more about trauma-informed care? Absolutely, I can. ABA has a bad reputation for a reason. People in the 80s, BCBAs in the 80s, were doing some traumatic stuff, guys. We have since learned, and alongside other medically tangential providers like speech and OT, we're taking a neurodiverse affirming position, which means that we aren't trying to cure or change them. We're trying to, it's more accommodate, less treat, more accommodate, less change. A trauma-informed approach is gonna have elements of that neurodiverse affirming practice. It is also going to prioritize trust. It's going to prioritize safety, and it's going to prioritize relationships and rapport over compliance and goal meeting. This next bit is a deep dive into skills-based treatment and essentials for living that kind of go hand in hand. If someone approached me on the street and said, without knowing anything, what would you do for a medically complex child with severe challenging behavior? SBT and EFL. I wouldn't do that. I would meet them first. But if you did, it's our frontline treatment now. They also have what's called universal protocols, which we've also developed. This is the other thing you can ask a BCBA, especially if you're working in a clinic. Ask, what trauma-informed universal protocols have you developed? They'll love you for that one. Either that or they won't call you back. Because they're gonna be like, this person's too well informed. That makes me nervous. What you got?
And this may be too specific, so if it is, you can chat later, sorry. And I might not use the correct terminology, so I apologize.
What's correct terminology?
Would the idea across the board, whether it be skills-based or just like your old school way of ABA, lend towards the idea that there needs to be some sort of general basic knowledge of things like prerequisites that kids need in order to then work on some of these things? Is that true across old ABA and your SBT or no?
Well, that's specific to where they were educated.
Oh, okay. So you know what I'm talking about, though.
Yes.
Okay.
So you want a BCBA with a more robust understanding of developmental milestones,
Yeah.
other than just the VB map, right?
Okay.
Red flags, right? Your BCBA pulls up and says, this is the ABLES. We're going to do this binder. Once we're done with this binder, you're graduated and good to go. Okay, great. So you teach my kid to do everything in this binder. Is it going to solve the actual 3 things that I'm here to talk to you about? Maybe. I don't know. Same thing with VB-MAP, same thing with any other specific protocol. It should be completely individualized to your child. Anything that looks like it's being like mass produced, red flag.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah?
Hi. Hi. This is kind of, well, I don't know that it's relevant to exactly her, it's not. Okay, so anyway, my question is, because we're talking about behaviors and behavior therapy and ABA and all of that. So how do you know, because my daughter had behaviors that were mainly in home, never really at school. And then so recently she's had to start a new school, has a lot of anxiety, obviously. That says she has headaches, this, that. how do you know if it's, I mean, especially with WSS, where there's so many physical ailments or symptoms, and then anxiety, how do you know, because I have my therapist saying you have to get, not mine, but hers, you have to get her to school. You have to get her to school. She's crying at school, going to the nurse saying my head really hurts, and they're like, they won't even call me. So how do you differentiate?
Yeah.
And,
My guess is that this therapist is saying that the saying that I have a headache and that I'm anxious is escape maintained. Yeah. School refusal is good. School avoidance is, and that if we let her go home, it's going to reinforce these behaviors, and so she's going to do it in the future. Okay. I don't really have like a really polished answer to that. So what if it is? Okay, so it's escape maintained. Something about her environment is bothering her enough that she's engaging in that behavior, right? Because she doesn't want to be there. It doesn't really matter if the headache's real or not, right? If the headache's medical or if it's anxiety, if it's behavioral, who cares? Something's not comfortable in her environment, and our job is to first identify the need and then unconditionally meet the need. And this is where I feel like, especially young BCBAs, they lose the sight of it. They skip straight to treatment because that's where the progress is. That's where the money is, and they skip really thorough assessment of the challenging behavior because and I could be wrong, but have they done a full ecological assessment of the environment? Have they asked for her medical records to rule out medical? Have they tried adjusting her setting or been open to that? And so, and now that's not going to be a popular answer with other behavior therapists. I know because I've networked with other behavior therapists. There were 5 of us working on Christian's case, trying to figure out what we were going to do, so that's not going to be a popular answer. Yes. 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 So what she said was she feels like she knows her kid the most and that they start judging her for enabling her child. Yeah? That feels true. I am so sorry people have made you feel that way, that we're supposed to help you. That's not what we're supposed to be here to do. And my answer to that is, again, okay, so they say you're enabling her behavior. So what? You are the expert in your child. This is why, again, I tell my graduate students, do not ever let me hear you look at a parent who has lived their entire life with this child, is hypervigilant about this child, wakes up, like Carrie said, wakes up, where is this child? What's this child doing? Has done research, attended conferences, become expert in fields that they were not trained in. Do not ever look at that parent and say that they don't know what they're talking about. Your job is to assume, first of all, that they know exactly what they're talking about, and it's your job to learn how to take that into your perspective. That professional humility is what's missing from the BCBAs from the 2010 to 2020 bunch. This is what I mean when I say I get preachy. Yeah.
Candy Krieger in Baltimore.
Yeah.
It's called NBU. It's Neurological Behavioral Unit.
Yeah.
She was in the outpatient clinic. And it was during COVID, and we did it, Zoom. And it was very analytical, gathering information, gathering observations. I'm looking for reasons, was it escape? Was it avoid? Was it, I can't even remember all of them.
Yep.
It was very, I don't want to say clinical, but it was lots of little, what's the word? Experimental, analysis,
Yeah.
give her this toy and then take it away in 30 seconds and turn your back towards her. It was very, that's the only way I can describe
So
it.
what you're describing is a functional analysis, and it is
Functional analysis,
yes, it is
okay,
a clinically
that's the word.
controlled assessment with experimental controls built in, under
Yes.
the assumption that the behavior has a single function. And I'm going to tell you that it is very unlikely that your WSS warrior has a behavior with a single
Right.
function.
So because So, and then just one more quick thing.
No, you're good. I'm just gonna
So
skip to the slide that
because
explains
we went through that, it is kind of like ingrained, again, this was like 2 or 3 times a week for like 4 or 5 hours. So, we went through this for like months. And so we're like a little bit, brainwashed a little bit about it. And so we're kind of trying to come out of that. But I guess my point in bringing that up is, would you say that is consistent with what you do and what you're talking about, or is it inconsistent?
So I actually have a slide coming up
Okay.
that specifically says why I do not recommend traditional functional analysis for children with Wiedemann-Steiner syndrome, for a lot of reasons. I'm going to try not to look too much at Crystal because I'll get mad about it all over again. The number of hours that I know again, there were 5 BCBAs working on this, 2 of which had PhDs, right, at the time that I came onto Christian's case. And we had absolutely no functional control over this behavior. We had no experimental control. Functional analyses are expensive, they're risky, they're resource costly, and you spend a lot of time doing them, and you know what the result is most often? Inconclusive. What? Crystal spent hours. They brought me, and they said, well, they're going to do an FA over at this other clinic. The PhD's over there. The director's going to do it. And I was like, oh, great. He's fancy and smart. He'll figure it out. Wrong. It was inconclusive. They spent hours doing this treatment to get to like 4.5 minutes of being able to have the. It's just not. It is good. I'll tell you when a functional analysis is good, because I do run FAs in the clinic. I just don't do them. Oh, hang on. Where am I going? Oh, no. This is what I mean. We're all the way back at the beginning. I do run functional analysis early on in treatment. If we catch a behavior early, a functional analysis is a great tool. My guess is that by the time that you were working with the neurobehavior unit, that this was not a new behavior, that it had a robust history, a complex history, and what the practical functional analysis is going to refer to as a synthesized history. Remember how we talked about the crying gets lots of different needs met, and so you end up guessing and end up reinforcing, causes all kinds of problems? That's the assumption for children with significant communication and motor and social deficits, is that challenging behavior has worked to meet their needs for so long that there isn't a single function anymore. So again, if you're working with a child with autism who's newly diagnosed, they got diagnosed last week, you got them into your clinic and they're 2 years old, yeah, you're not dealing with a ton of history. Maybe you can do a regular functional analysis. I mean, if you're good, you don't need a full-on FA, but that's fine. Do what you want. They are very clinically controlled, and they're beautiful when you graph them, but again, most of the time inconclusive. And so there are some assumptions in traditional functional analysis, that the behavior is occurring in response to a specific stimulus in the environment. Okay, well, that should sound familiar. We just talked about that most likely your child with anxiety is not responding to a specific stimulus in the environment. Their anxiety tells them to respond to all stimulus related to all potentially alarming or distressing environments. So that's already we're out of that ballpark. The behavior serves a single function to change the environment. Also likely not true for children with this profile. And that we need to teach a functionally equivalent replacement behavior. That is true, and you do need to teach a functionally equivalent replacement behavior. But if the behavior historically has served multiple functions, what is the functionally equivalent replacement behavior? A behavior that serves all functions, right? So that's how you treat it. You teach what's called an omnibus mand. It's from the Latin, meaning works for a bus, meaning works, and omni, meaning all, works for all things, an omnibus mand. And actually, there is, I don't know if the video is going to work. This is the slide where I tell you, or hang on, where'd it go? Anyway. Abram, I didn't tell you this video was in here, sorry. Okay. Abram helped me make this for training in my clinic recently. Oh, no, these are my Legos. You can have your own Legos over there, but please do not touch my Legos. These are mine. I am not good at sharing.
Okay, time to clean up the Legos.
I don't want to clean up the Lego!
Okay. We can keep going.
Yeah, I'm really good at having challenging behavior. Okay, so that's a practical functional analysis. Based on that, the function of my behavior, right? Because Abram stands up and says, okay, it's time to get to work. And then I scream about my Legos. Is it about the Legos? Is it about the transition? Is it about the lack of attention during work? Maybe it's independent work. Is it about that the work might be too hard? Yes, it's about all of those things. And so we have to teach a behavior that meets all of those goals. Now, I don't have any video of, this is Christian, this is Euderica, she was my partner on Christian's case. I don't have any video from his analysis, so you'll have to do with just, me pretending. But, oh, hang on, I did it again. Hang on. Okay, let's see if we can get this one to play. Nope. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. So anyway, what happens is you teach, hang on, I've got to play two parts here. Okay. You assess by you turn the behavior on and off by providing all the consequences and then removing all the consequences all at once. Now, what a behavior analytics snob is going to tell you is that there's not enough experimental control in that. Well, what if you're reinforcing a behavior that didn't have that function? And I have my very unpolished answer, which is, so what? Right? This is about getting to a life that's not governed by challenging behavior. This is about getting my child regulated. This is about getting my child to a place where he can build relationships with people that he trusts, and we can move on and learn new skills. This is skills-based treatment. So what you end up teaching is, I want my way, or some version of that. Oh gosh, I wish this would play. I don't know if we can. I might not be doing this right, but so you say, okay, it's time to go get some work done, and the child says, I want my way. And you say, okay, man, no problem. And you let them have their way, right? There's another component to this. It's called HRE. It's happy, relaxed, and engaged. Before you ever present something, a stimulus that you know might be distressing for your child, you make sure they're happy, relaxed, and engaged. That's the control for anxiety that I talked about. If your child is anxious, do you know it? As a parent, can you tell? Probably. You probably have subtle ways that you don't even know that you can know that your child is anxious. When it was time for me to transfer Christian's case from me as an RBT to a BCBA, we failed in transferring his case over to an RBT several times because I didn't realize that I was providing an accommodation. When I was working with Christian, I kept my hand on him because he gave a very subtle tell that he was anxious. His little shoulders would start to creep up. Not enough that you could see it. He was very subtle. And so I knew when he was anxious, and I just didn't give demands. So is that escape? Yeah, you better believe it is. Absolutely, because we deserve to have behaviors function to escape. I have escape-maintain behaviors. I have the ability to say, hey, I see you coming in my office with that problem. I don't have the capacity for that right now. They don't have that capacity. They don't have the ability to say that. But they deserve the right to be free from conditions that they're not comfortable in right then. So let's get to the. This is the taken off of the skills-based treatment website because I'm sure there's some of you out there and you're like, Lucy, that sounds great that they're going to say I want my way. I already live in a world where my child's getting their way like most of the time, and so I don't really think that's going to work for us. There's many steps after that. So you first teach them, hey, I'm someone you can trust not to provide a distressing stimulus to you if you are already distressed. I see you, I hear you, I know you, and I'm not going to make the life worse for you until I know you're in a place where you can take it. That's that trauma-informed piece. That's relationships, that's rapport, that's trust. And then when you say, okay, now we are going to really do the hard thing, They have all that trust in you because they know that they don't have to engage in severe challenging behavior to get you to back off. All they have to do is say, hey, okay, I hear you, we'll back off. After that, you teach what's called a tolerance response, where they say, I want my way, and you say, no. Ooh, how many of you have figured out all creative ways to avoid saying that word? Yeah, no's a bad word. We don't want to say that word. And so we work around it. We spend our lives in antecedent manipulation, trying to do everything we can to avoid a trigger, to avoid the thing that we know is going to cause anxiety. But if you have this trust and rapport built up, you're able to do it. You just say, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to desensitize the word no. So you say, no, buddy, not right now. And then you teach them to say, okay. And you know what you do after they say, okay? That was so great, buddy. You did such a nice job saying, okay. Go back to doing whatever you want. You can have your way. And then you do that for a little while. And then you say, okay, great. Now we're so good at saying my way and okay, we're going to learn other skills, right? We're going to say, okay, man, it's time to get up. We got to go to the table and do our homework. I want my way. No, not right now, man. Okay. All right. Go put your iPad in the bin. Pauses the iPad. Goes over. Puts it in the bin. In the early phases, you say, man, you were so sweet to put your iPad away so nicely. Go ahead, have your way. This happens not in a matter of weeks and weeks and weeks of assessment. This can happen in a day. It is a very rapid progressing treatment if done correctly. And then you get to where now we're to learning skills. We're back where we needed to be. And so did we spend a lot of time reinforcing challenging behavior? Yep. Did we spend some time reinforcing a very low effort response to get their needs met? You betcha, that was the point. And now we're back at skills, what they call contextually appropriate behaviors, because not all behavior is appropriate for all environments. In the training, Dr. Hanley, who developed this protocol, talks about how one of the contextually appropriate behaviors that they needed to develop was this kid to play on his iPad by himself so that mom could cook dinner. And he said that was his favorite one because most parents have a problem getting the iPad away from the kids. This parent really needed them to watch the iPad by themselves. This is my chance to put in a plug for Essentials for Living. If your child is for sure going to have a lifelong disability, if they have a moderate to severe presentation of that disability, you want to try and find a BCBA that is familiar with Essentials for Living. It's the next step after VB-MAP. It's full of functional skills that will actually be relevant to you and your child and the life that they're going to live. There was a picture of one of my buddies earlier. I'll see if I can go back if it's going backwards. That's what I'm doing, is don't go backwards. Is that what I'm messing up? Anyway, there's a picture of one of my friends up here. He was 11 when he came to me for treatment. He had kicked the windows out of his house several times. It was after COVID. He'd been at home for a long time. He did not wear shirts or pants or shoes. And there was no, we were not, if we put clothes on him, they were getting Hulk ripped off. That was not happening. So where did we start? We started with, we got to put some pants on, man. But you know what the treatment plan that I inherited for this child had him working on? He's 11. He has no functional communication and he will not wear clothes in public. Colors. I mean, I literally took it to my clinic director and said, what is this bleep? What is this? He's 11. Why are we still working on colors? He's been working on this for years. Who cares if he doesn't know his colors? He has no functional communication, no tolerance skills, and the man doesn't wear clothes. We have got to prioritize some things here. Anyway, I wish the picture of him. He's got on like multiple layers of clothes so that he could go play soccer, and he goes to school, and he does great now. But the first thing that we did was just, okay, bud, it's time to put pants on. And he would say, I want mine. And we'd say, okay, you don't have to. And then we kept on watching Mickey Mouse. And that's why you need a behavior analyst that is willing, that knows enough about what's going on to individualize your treatment. Because you don't want to be the 11-year-old with no functional skills still being asked to, by the way, he knew colors. Like once we got to the relationship building part and we got to the end of it, he knew colors. He was just so over adults asking him about it that he wasn't paying attention anymore. He'd been working on this since he was like 3 years old. I mean, I remember the day that he was like, she started like doing it and he like looked over at me and I was like, you punk, you knew the whole time, didn't you? And he's like, haha, I did. And then, okay, so what time is it? I feel like, okay, I've got 4 minutes left. I feel like I write whole presentations with like nice outlines and stuff and then I just go rogue. So I have to put the lavalier on me. More questions? What do we got? I don't. Can I move there? Man, so I get so I actually get this question. There is a way that you can look up. The question was, do I know anybody who is qualified in LA? And if not, will I move there? We are very dedicated to staying in Mississippi. My husband also works in disability work. He works at a community center and living facility. And we both went off to graduate school and people were like, why are you moving back to Mississippi? We're like, man, that's where the work is. That's where the work to be done is on a lot of fronts. So I mean, LA sounds great, but Mississippi has less than 10% of the necessary providers for their pediatric population. And I, like I said, I have 9 grad students, very dedicated to closing that gap. But FTF Behavior Consulting, if you look up skills-based treatment, they have a website, Dr. Hanley, and people can actually get certified in doing this. And so you can ask them, are you certified? At what level are you certified? Are you willing to take this 10-hour continuing education? That's what, it's ftfbc.com. And again, I'll get you a card. And if you're trying to vet somebody, call me.
I have another question over here.
What you got?
Well, I just wanted to say, we have been doing the My Way protocol. You've been wonderful for Delilah. We had someone local in Buffalo
hey.
who called her up after our last conference, helped us, has been on the journey with us. The only thing I guess I feel frustrated is you're saying it could be so quick, and we've been dragging this out
they're
for
taking
a
their time.
while. More for like the lack of technicians. And then we get one and they leave and then it's like brand new again. And so my mom and I have recently gone to Catherine, our BCBA, like, okay, we need to what do we need to do to move past just standing on the circle? Like we're not even into, when you're saying that last step is we can get back to not having this awful behavior.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can't imagine you have advice for speeding it up.
So, I know like a ton about your case specifically, so I'm going to try and broaden it out a little bit. It's the number of hours that you need, right? So when I take on an SBT client, I only take on 1 or 2 at a time because they are really intensive treatments. And whereas normally kids come to our clinic for 8 to 15 hours a week, my clients usually start at 23 hours a week, which is not normal, right? So there's, again, here's the other thing. If a BCBA tells you that your 4-year-old, your 2 or 3-year-old child needs 40 hours of ABA, no toddler needs to be doing 40 hours of anything. So that's fake news. Don't listen to that. But 23 hours is our most intensive. And a lot of times, I as the BCBA do a lot of that work myself. That's not how a lot of companies, I have the benefit of, I was the first BCBA ever hired at our company. It's a small company and my clinic director is the bomb and lets me basically do whatever I want. And so I have that latitude to have a smaller caseload and do that. But it does work better if you can do kind of an intensive, like 2 weeks. That's what we did to get ready to go to school. We did like a full-on 2 weeks and I delivered most of the services myself. Because it does require a certain level of clinical decision-making that a brand new RBT is not going to be able to do. Even the best ones.
Are allotted 15 or 18 hours a week?
Yeah, but they're working on other stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, should we get rid of all the other goals and just do?
That's what I should say, and I like Catherine, is it's up to your BCBA. My recommendation is yes, work on that, because it is, in fact, the skills is the gateway to being able to learn skills. Like the My Way is the gateway to be able to learn the other skills without having to fight about it. So.
Awesome, thank you so much. We
I know,
are going to be switching over to the next session, so I know if there's more questions, the good part is you're coming back tomorrow, and you're going to be,
Tomorrow I'm talking about puberty, and we're going to say fun words. It's going to be great.
Well, thank you so much. If for those that are going on to introductions for medications,